Can everyone see it now?
Yeah.
All right, perfect, thank you. So, we're gonna talk about paying for dental school and just some financial aid basics as well along the way. Just everything you need to know while you're preparing for um, getting your finances in order for dental school. So, let's see here. First up, cost of attendance. This is going to be your most important number when you're comparing different dental schools. So basically, it's going to give you an estimate of how much it costs to go to that school with living expenses included. So you want to definitely, if you have multiple schools that you're applying to or getting offers to, keep an Excel spreadsheet, compare all of those numbers. And what you'll start to see is that ours is actually lower than most other schools, and we'll go into an example of that as well. This number should account for, again, everything that you need. So including like supplies for the actual dental program, books, rent, everything. But it's not going to be an exact number either, because things like living expenses, so like food, rent, utilities, we can only give you a really good estimate of how much it costs to live in that city. So we do a lot of work to keep ours up to date at all times. We keep it up to date annually. So if rent went up, the cost of attendance would go up to match it. You'll never have to worry about not having enough money to attend school. The number also doesn't include interest. So interest would be on the loans you take out. And if you don't take out all of the money you're allowed to through the cost of attendance, which is the number saying how much you can borrow, then you wouldn't get interest on that amount. And like I mentioned, the cost of attendance, that is the maximum amount of financial aid you can borrow. This includes all types of financial aid. So if you have scholarships, loans, grants, work study, whatever it may be, it all adds up to this one number and you can't go above that number. So let's say, for example, you have a cost of attendance of 10,000 and you have $10,000 of loans and a $2,000 scholarship come in later. You're not going to get that $2,000 extra on top of it. Your loans would be reduced by 2,000 because it has to maintain within that cost of attendance. There are slight additions to that. So you're never allowed to go above that number, but you can increase that number. So let's say, for example, you find a place to live wherever it's at, and the rent there is more than what that school has on their cost of attendance. Typically, you can go ahead and ask for the difference between those two numbers. So again, let's say your rent costed 12,000 and your cost of attendance for rent was 10,000. You can get that additional 2,000 added on, but of course we don't want to do that too often because that's $2,000 more of loans. So you really want to stay below the cost of attendance if possible. And you'll definitely want to keep that in mind for rent because that's going to be your biggest living expense throughout the 4 years. If you're ever thinking about credit card debt as an option instead of taking loans out, please don't think about that. Your credit card is probably 15, 25, maybe 30% interest monthly on whatever the balance is due. The entire thing is compounding interest versus the loans that are going to be just kind of a simple interest, so you pay less. It's at like 5% instead of looking at 20%, and you don't have to pay anything on it till after you graduate. Ideally, you continue living like a student in dental school and not like a dentist because you're going to take out hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. The faster you can pay that off, the faster you can live like a dentist later on. So as promised, we do have that cost of attendance example. So this is the current year's cost of attendance for our college. So you see the different categories like tuition, UF fees, books and supplies, food, transportation, and so on. Not all of the categories will look the same depending on the school. They can report it differently. So maybe they take food, transportation, housing, and call it one category of living expenses. Be on the lookout for that. It's not them trying to be sneaky or anything, it's just how they decided to report it. So if you see something there that's maybe not at a different school, it could just be lumped into a different category. Also, something you'll want to notice is the state resident and the out-of-state resident portions on these cost of attendances. So for us at the bottom of our little chart on the left-hand side, you'll see out-of-state 26,480. For us, that's additional on top of that 78,000 number above it. So that works out to a little over 100,000 for the first year. Some schools might have the out-of-state portion on the cost of attendance a little difficult to find. Stay persistent, find it. It makes a difference if you're going to be out of state. It makes a big difference. While you're looking at the out-of-state portion, though, you'll also want to keep a list of your schools on who will allow you to go ahead and reclassify from an out-of-state resident to an in-state resident. For any people that are out of state for Florida, we will allow you after 1 year to go ahead and petition to be classified as an in-state resident for tuition purposes. So maybe it's looking like year one, you're paying that a little bit over 100,000. If you take out all of that money, you don't have to. But year two, you drop down to 76 because you were able to successfully turn into a Florida resident. Not all schools offer that. So you'll definitely want to make sure on all of your options, if any of them are going to be out of state.
Can I just add something here?
Yeah, go ahead.
That we, as a College of Dentistry, do not determine your residency. Okay, that is determined by University of Florida. So therefore, since we don't determine it as an office or as a college, we cannot guarantee that that would happen. We have good success with our students petitioning and gaining in-state residency, but it's by no means guaranteed.
Exactly. And while we can't guarantee it, we'll also, help you along a little way, send out some reminders. Hey, it's been a year. Did you petition to see if you could reclassify? So you don't have to worry about remembering by yourself. Ideally, yes, please remember by yourself. It is your responsibility ultimately, but we will help you along the way where we can. Something I do want to point out as well on cost of attendances, the transportation area of the cost of attendance at no institution anywhere is that going to be for covering your trips going home, traveling for vacation, anything like that. That's completely off the table. What transportation on cost of attendances are for everyone nationally is for you to get to class. So let's say your car breaks down, your scooter breaks down, there's money here to help you fix that so you can get to school, or maybe bus fares, whatever it may be, depending on where you're going. Bus fares for here, for example, are free as a student. So if you're looking at going out of state, let's just say that school you're looking at is the same out of state cost as we have, an additional $26,000 that you have to pay. But every time you want to go home and visit your family, maybe you have to get a flight, maybe $500–600. Maybe you go 2 or 3 times a year. This starts to add up a lot. So this is just kind of a comparison between 2 different schools. We won't list who the school on the left is, just some private institution, and then a public institution on the right, which, as you might recognize, is still us. So I think just looking at the bottom of the private institution, you'll see the total for $99,881 for the first year. And that's as a resident at that institution. For our first year, it was that $78,155. So it's still more expensive to go to this place on the left, even if they were to offer you a scholarship. And that's going to be something to keep in mind as well when offers are coming in and you're trying to decide where to go. So getting a scholarship feels great, but it doesn't mean financially it makes the most sense. So if your goal is to go ahead and get rid of your loan debt as quick as possible, don't be fooled by a feel-good scholarship. Do your homework, check to see, does this financially make sense for me to go to this place, or would it still be more expensive, costing me however much money extra each year? And just on a note, interest starts the moment your loans first come out. So maybe you get the scholarship for the first year, but then you have to pay all that extra money on years 2, 3, and 4, and interest is calculated on that. And now it's still a ton more to go to that school, just based on interest alone. The other thing I want to touch on for comparing these two things, you'll start to see what we were talking about earlier, where they just list different things on here than what we list. Graduation fee, technology fee, curriculum fee, all of that's just in our UF fees. Different insurances, board, books, like we include the board, what they're calling for food, just as food. Dental equipment for us is put into supplies. So every institution's calling it something a little bit different. If you were to look at our website, we have a breakdown of each category. So like books and supplies would have a little paragraph at the bottom saying this includes all of your dental instruments that you'll need throughout the programs. And other institutions do the same thing, depending on how broad their categories are. So this, again, comparing just numbers, just to help you out of what you should be thinking. So the first column is your 4-year cost of attendance. So if you borrow the maximum amount every single year at UFCD, it would be $291,000. The second column starts when we start looking at the other rows. That's going to be how much more you have to pay. So just looking at other Florida private, that second row, that's $101,000 more. What we've done in the third and fourth columns are going to be how much more you have to pay. So the third column is per month. That's $1,200 extra per month. That's a rent payment right there. The 10-year total is just going ahead and adding that up for you. That's $141,000 extra that you had to pay over 10 years compared to going to UFCD. Oftentimes, to help put it in perspective, you probably already read it at the bottom. That's like, putting a down payment down on a house or purchasing a car and not getting to keep it. It makes a huge difference over time, especially when you start looking at some of these other institutions like Northeast Private, $297,000 extra. That's an entire house, a really nice house, depending on where you're living. So do your homework now so you don't have to pay $500,000. As something else to add, while if you add our cost of attendance up, it gets you to that about $291,000. Most of our students borrow considerably less than that. Our class average was about $224,000 for our seniors that graduated last year. And if anyone is curious, just stay tuned. Ask me in about a month or so. We'll have our current year's graduates, how much they borrowed on average.
So just a rule of thumb,
Yes.
every $10,000 you pay extra is going to be a little greater than $100 more a month.
And again, that adds up very quickly on those monthly payments. So this is just kind of going over residency again, we kind of talked about it a little bit earlier for that reclassification process. And like Dr. Sandow said, here at UFCD, we don't do residency. The main admissions office through Maine UF will do all of your residency information. But you can reclassify at UF. You can pay 1 year out of state, same as every other in-state person for your last 3 years. Again, other schools do not necessarily offer that, so it's definitely something you want to ask about and not to assume. If we can cut out those substantial non-resident tuition fees added on, you're going to be a lot better off than just eating it for 4 years. Let me see here. So that's like the first and second bullet point. Something else you can look at and ask your schools, a little trickier to find, but very helpful, is your school's default rate. So here at UF, specifically UFCD, we have less than a 1% default rate, meaning basically all of our seniors who graduate and go on to work and pay off their debt, less than 1% of them have been unable to afford the bill. Not all schools will have a default rate that low. They might have 5%, 10%, just depends on that school, how much they're letting students borrow and how much effort they put into just helping you guys with budgeting, helping you with repayment, to send you off into repayment the best we can. At UFCD, we'll do a whole bunch of budgeting talks before you get into dental school. We'll do talks throughout the dental program of just kind of check-ins. And the 4th year, you'll actually be required to meet with us about repayment specifically. And that's what I'm fixing to do for our seniors now. And it's a 45-minute minimum talk about, hey, this is how much you borrowed, here's your interest, here are the repayment plans available. What are you planning on doing in life? Let's talk about it and try to figure this out. And it's very well received. A lot of the seniors don't know about the repayment, and learning about it before you have to make any decisions about it is an incredibly helpful thing. Oh, I went backwards. All right, so how to get financial aid. So FAFSA is going to be pretty much the only thing you have to worry about right now. This thing opens up October 1 every single year like clockwork. Some schools will have deadlines. At UF, we do not have a deadline on this. You can get it in at any time during the year, but we strongly encourage you, just do it on October 1, get it over with. That's one less thing for you to do. And it does play a factor in priority funding for some of our grants. To be eligible for the FAFSA, either US citizen or eligible non-citizen, if you get into the DMD program, you're eligible for financial aid for that category. On studentaid.gov, that's going to be where you can complete this. Throughout the FAFSA, you'll have helpful hints through every single question, and we'll look at that a little bit later. Now, if this is your first time doing your FAFSA, you will need a Federal Student Aid ID or FSA ID. It's basically just going to be your social security number tied to an account so the FAFSA can process everything it needs to process. And what they're doing is they're sending all of your information off to pretty much every department for the government, and they're all checking 1 or 2 things and then sending you on through. Make sure you spell your name exactly like you do on the FAFSA and the application to the school. If they're not matching, then your FAFSA will not match up automatically to your student account. And that's pretty universal at every school. So please be careful on that. If you have hyphenated names, be very careful. If you have random capitalizations, in any part of your name. Be careful, make sure it matches everywhere. When filling out the FAFSA, the tax information, ideally, you use the IRS data retrieval tool. It'll pop up automatically asking you if you want to go ahead and do that. And what it allows you to do is just kind of click it, give them the information they're looking for to verify it's you, and they'll load every question on the FAFSA for financials for you, so you don't have to worry about entering that information. Not everyone's eligible to use it. Just go ahead and try to use it. It saves so much time if you are. Every single FAFSA is going to use 2 years back tax information. So for example, 2022, 2023, we're looking at 2020 tax information. And it just keeps going 2 years back like that for whatever year FAFSA you're doing. On the FAFSA, list every dental school that you're applying to. There's no penalty there. No one's going to know that, hey, you listed us and 9 other schools. That doesn't matter. This is just, if you're using financial aid, one less step to do wherever you commit. Again, check the deadlines. UF, we don't have one. Just do it as soon as possible to get it done with. But other schools might say, hey, you have to have this done by December 15th to be considered for this type of financial aid. Just depends on what that school's offering and how they're processing things. And then again, there's helpful hints, explanations for every single question on the FAFSA. And they look a little something like this. So question 1, if you're confused about the last name, it will give you a little mini paragraph explaining what it's looking for that particular question. So then everyone's always curious about parent financial information. Do I have to submit it on my FAFSA? And the answer is essentially no, universally. You do not have to if you're only seeking loans. You'll be considered an independent student just because you're a graduate professional student, and do not have to include your parental information. But depending on the school, they might have additional types of financial aid where you do have to include that parent financial information. So at USCD, we do have that requirement for our scholarship application. So if you wanted to be in the running for completing that application and seeing if you could get a scholarship, go ahead and include your parental information. So it's, again, one less thing you have to do. But let's say you just know you won't be eligible for scholarships and you don't even want to bother trying. Don't put your parental financial information on your FAFSA, just skip the section. Every school is a little bit different, so that's another thing you'll want to make sure. Does the other institution require parental information for any of the awards? Because you don't want to miss out on anything if you don't put it there and then find out later that you needed it. And then, yeah, if you do put parental financial information on your FAFSA, it makes no difference in terms of your loans. You're not going to be able to, you're not going to be penalized for putting parental information. You can still borrow the max amount of loans. Doesn't matter how much your parents make. It'll play 0 role in your financial aid loans. And yeah, questions? Anything at all?
Yeah, I got a question.
Yeah.
So I was told that the last 10 kids to get into the USCD dentistry class have to pay full out-of-state tuition for 4 years. Is there any truth to this?
Dr. Sandow, would you like to answer that question?
It is not, it is not out-of-state tuition. And if it is, appropriate for you, you will be asked and you will know about it, okay?
Thank you.
All right, any other questions?
Zachary, did you have one? I think you had your hands, and then we'll go to Deba next.
I did, yeah. It was about the scholarships. I don't know if you were able to maybe expand a little bit more on that and like when certain deadlines are for that, because I know they said that when it was all the seats are filled for the class, it's once that's done, then they go to the scholarships. But if there's a way you could just elaborate on that, I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. So for us here, we send it out about mid to late spring semester, an application to all of our current students and everyone that said yes to date for committing to us to start in the fall. So they all get it right at that first date that I released the application. However, if you're admitted after that date, you still get added to that application. You get the same access, you get the same amount of time to fill it out. There's no penalty whatsoever.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're
Appreciate it.
welcome.
Deba?
Yeah, I was just wondering if Bright Futures is applicable to dental school and UFCB.
The answer is it depends. So if you've completed your bachelor's degree in 7 semesters or less, or I believe like 105 credits or less, and you have remaining Bright Futures credits, then you can have 1 semester funded for 15 credit hours at the undergraduate rate for Bright Futures. If you don't meet finishing your bachelor's degree in either of those timeframes, then you wouldn't be able to use your Bright Futures for dental school. But it's only a 1 semester thing if you do meet that criteria.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I think I see something in the chat. If I completed my FAFSA as an independent, can I submit it with parental information? Absolutely. So all of you, again, will be independent when you fill out your FAFSA by default for applying to a professional program. You can always log back into your FAFSA at any time to add that parental information. And again, there's no penalty for having parental information on there. You get the same amount of loans as everyone else. And if there's any need-based financial aid at that institution for requirements to have the parental information, it's just already there for you. All right, I think I saw Emmanuel first.
Yeah, I read online through the link that you guys sent me that the DMD students did not have to pay for the summer semester, the tuition. Could you expand a little bit more on that?
So the way that's working here is we're set on a block schedule. And what that ends up meaning is you pay the entire year's tuition for fall and spring. And since you've paid the entire year, that means there's no tuition left to pay for summer. The only things you'll have to worry about for summer will be an instrument leasing fee that we have, health insurance if you're getting it through UF, and maybe any small class fees. And the class fees are usually like less than $100. All right, and then Zachary.
So kind of to expand a little bit more on the meeting you were talking about earlier, when you said that after, when you're at the end of the 4th year, you have that talk with those people. Is that something that you guys do throughout all 4 years, or is it only that 1 year? Like, is that something that I could do, you know, after the year and then after the 2nd year? How does that work?
Yeah, so we only require it in the 4th year. And that's just because years 1, 2, and 3, and your first semester of your D4 year, you should just be worried mostly about, I need to get through the curriculum and learn this material. So we don't want to bog them down with too much. However, at any point, if there's anything you want to know about financial aid, the repayment included, I'm more than happy to go through the same like 45-minute talk about everything repayment with you at any time. If you as a class have a topic that you guys are interested in, you can always request it, and I'm happy to show up at a class meeting and go ahead and give that presentation. And it doesn't matter when your class meetings are, if it's an evening, if it's a weekend, I'm still happy to show up.
Perfect. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
We have a follow-up to the Bright Futures question, Jacob, from Jillian. She asked in the chat for the Bright Futures question, does that include summer semesters or only fall and spring?
That is a great question. I believe for everyone here, the summer semesters don't count anymore. But I will double check to make sure that's correct and get back to you. Let me just take note of that.
Okay, thank you. Do you need my email or anything to get the information back, or?
Yeah, if you want to private message it to me, that would be pretty convenient
Okay.
for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and then Esther.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for being here. Thank you for
Okay.
your time. I just had a quick question. I know it's a little bit too in the future, but how does
Mhm.
financial aid look like for like residency programs? And if we want to continue our education after dental school?
Gotcha. So it'll be basically the same exact steps. Still need your FAFSA. Depending on the residency program, financial aid may or may not be available. So that'll be something you'll want to look into, because it has to be a financial aid eligible program. So for example, here, endo, ortho, pros, perio, operative at a certain point are all financial aid eligible because they're master's degrees. Anything that might be a certificate, so like our oral surgery 4-year track, would not be financial aid eligible, or the 1-year, what is it, GPR or AEG? No, GPRs, those would not be eligible either, just typically. So you want to just make sure with the institution that has a residency program you're curious about, that that program is financial aid eligible. And just in general, that boils down to, is it a master's degree or not?
The other note I'll add to piggyback on that as it relates to residencies is, depending on the program and the school, what's the stipend situation? And sometimes you have to look beyond, okay, what are your long-term plans? Because there might be certain restrictions if you're looking at one residency and then potentially another one. Taking certain stipends for the first one might inhibit you on the second one as well. So there's a lot of different layers to have to keep in mind when it comes time for that.
Because some of those programs are funded.
Yeah. We have another message in the chat from Heidi. Is health insurance through UFCD specifically required? If so, does that factor into the cost of attendance?
Great question. So it is not specifically required to have health insurance through UF. It is required, though, to have health insurance. Whether it comes through UF, it's your parents' insurance, it's your personal insurance, that doesn't matter as long as you provide it to UF showing proof that you have health insurance. That'll go ahead and work. And that'll go through typically our health compliance office. You just say, hey, I have this personal health insurance policy. They'll take a look at it. They'll say that meets our minimum requirements, and you do not have to get the one through UF. If you never tell them anything, though, because it is a requirement to have health insurance, they will automatically enroll you into the UF program. All right, and then Rosa.
Hi. If we plan to do a residency after finishing, do we have to start paying the loan like before residency or after residency?
Depends on the timing and the situation. So for you, I believe you said just like right after the DMD program. So you'll be starting within 6 months of graduating. And the reason 6 months is relevant is that's how long you do not have to pay loans for after graduation. It's a 6-month grace period. If you start a new program within that grace period, you just go right back into not having to pay your loans. Interest will still accrue like normal. but you don't have to worry about paying the principal amount. But let's say for the other situation, someone is going to go after 6 months, maybe like 2 years into repayment. Now's the time I really want to go into a residency program. You can stop your student loan payments. It will just be called, it will be through a process called forbearance. And that's basically just saying, hey, I am now enrolled in this educational program and I can't afford to pay my bill. They're required at that point to go ahead and say, okay, well, you don't have to pay it until after the program, but interest is still going to accrue throughout the program. So it effectively works out to be the same thing, where you never have to wait to pay your student loans off to do a more advanced education.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Not seeing anything. Well, if that is all of the questions, that would go ahead and conclude the presentation.